Welcome to The Explainer. We're going to dive right in today with a massive question.
I mean, seriously, think about that for a second. How do you write the rule book for over 1 billion people? That's exactly the challenge India faced, and its answer was the Constitution. Now, this isn't just some dusty legal book. It's the blueprint, the very DNA for the world's largest democracy.
So here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start with its creation story, then look at the structure of power it built. After that, we'll dive into what it means for you, the citizen, and how it gives power to the people. And finally, we'll see how this thing is still growing and changing today.
All right, first up, forging a nation's rulebook. Let's rewind the clock and go right back to the beginning. I mean, the creation of this document was an epic undertaking, happening right as India was about to become independent.
And you know, this wasn't something they just threw together overnight. The whole process kicked off back in 1946. It took almost 3 full years of debate, arguments, and careful drafting before they finally adopted it in late 1949. But the big day, the day it all became real, was January 26, 1950. That's when it officially came into force, and that's the day India now celebrates as Republic Day.
Now, if you're talking about who led this massive effort, one name stands out: Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. He was the chairman of the drafting committee, and honestly, his genius, his vision, it was absolutely central to the whole thing. It's no wonder he's called the architect of the Indian Constitution.
So, what's one of the first, most fundamental things this new rulebook did? It declared India a sovereign nation. What does sovereign even mean? It's simple, really. It means you're your own boss, free from outside control. India could now make its own laws, run its own show, with no one else telling it what to do. That's a huge deal.
Okay, so India is its own boss, but how do you actually structure the government? How does this rulebook handle power? Well, the last thing the founders wanted was to put all that power in one person's hands. No way. They designed a really clever system to keep everything in balance.
So that brings us to the big question: who's really in charge? And the answer is kind of brilliant. Nobody is. Not one single person or group. Instead, they split the power 3 ways. You've got the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. It's this classic system of checks and balances, designed specifically so that no one part of the government can get too powerful.
All right, let's look at the executive branch first. At the top, you have the president. Think of them as the head of state, the first citizen, and also the supreme commander of the armed forces. Now, what's interesting is the president isn't directly elected by every single person, but by members of parliament and state legislatures. And you see a similar setup in each state, just with a governor holding that executive power.
Okay, next up is the legislature. This is the parliament, and it's split into 2 houses. First, you've got the Lok Sabha, which translates to the House of the People. These are the folks who have the final say on anything to do with money, taxes, the budget, all that important stuff. Then you have the Rajya Sabha, the Council of States. Its members represent the different states and are chosen by their state legislatures for a 6-year term.
And that brings us to the third pillar, the judiciary. And at the very top of that pillar is the Supreme Court. You can think of them as the ultimate referee. They are the final word on what the Constitution means. Their whole job is to be the guardian, making sure everyone, and I mean everyone, from the government down to an individual citizen, is playing by the rules.
Okay, but this whole thing isn't just about government structures and who's in charge. Far from it. At its heart, the Constitution is a charter for you, for every single citizen. It lays out your rights and what the government owes you.
And the absolute core of that charter, that's the fundamental rights. And let's be clear, these aren't just nice suggestions. They are legally binding guarantees. We're talking about massive ideas like the right to equality, the right against exploitation, which, by the way, bans things like child labor, and the right to freedom of religion. These are rights the courts will protect no matter what.
Want a great example? Just look at Article 19. This one article is an absolute cornerstone of India's democracy. Why? Because it guarantees every single citizen the right to freedom of speech and expression. That's the right to speak your mind, to debate, to criticize, all the things a healthy democracy needs to survive.
But it doesn't stop with individual rights. The Constitution also has this grander vision. It's laid out in what are called the directive principles. The best way to think about these is like a moral compass for the government. They're not something you can sue over, but they are a constant reminder to the state that its goal should be to create a welfare state, a country that works for the social and economic good of all its people. So you have this big, amazing vision for the country. But how do you make sure that vision reaches all the way down to the villages? How do you make sure all the power doesn't just get stuck at the top? Well, the Constitution has an answer for that too.
It's all built around this really powerful idea called democratic decentralization. Sounds complicated, but it's not. It just means pushing power down, moving it away from the central government and putting it directly into the hands of local communities, so people get to have a real say in the decisions that affect their everyday lives.
And how do they do that, practically speaking? Through something called the Panchayati Raj system. This is basically a three-level system of local government. You've got councils at the village level, the block level, and the district level. What this means is that decisions about stuff like local schools or clean water aren't being made by someone hundreds of miles away. They're made by the people right there in the community.
And of course, at the end of the day, the ultimate power that's given to the people is the right to vote. And listen, this isn't just some regular law that can be changed easily. It is a constitutional right. It's the people's ultimate tool to keep their leaders in check, from the smallest village council all the way up to parliament.
You know, the people who wrote this Constitution were incredibly foresighted. They knew the India they were living in wouldn't be the same India we live in today. They knew things would change, so they were smart enough not to carve these rules in stone.
Instead, they created something that's been described as partly rigid, partly flexible. What does that mean? It means the core values, the very soul of the document, are really hard to change. But it also has a built-in way to be amended, to adapt, and grow with the times. It's a living, breathing document. And boy, has it evolved. Just look at some of the key changes. In 1976, they added the words socialist and secular right into the preamble. A huge one was in 1988, when they lowered the voting age from 21 down to 18, bringing millions of young people into the fold. We already talked about the 73rd Amendment that created the Panchayati Raj. And then in 2002, another massive step, making elementary education a fundamental right for every single child.
So, from the moment it was created all the way to today, the Constitution of India has been more than just a rulebook. It's been the nation's guide, its anchor through decades of incredible change. It really is a living document. And that just leaves us with one big question. What will its next chapter be?